Hello, listener. I want to remind you to check out my new Ultra Tri Fest coming to Whistler, British Columbia in August 2024. It has 5 racing formats to choose from, and the feature event will be the new Ultra 515 Worldwide Championships, in which racers from every 515 race in the world may attend. Get all the details at ultratrifestcanada.com, and feel free to contact me personally with any questions.
You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. Today's guest is a triathlon champion and coach who shares many tips on how to race the 515 distance learned from 20 plus years of triathlon. And she shares her Julie Moss moment. My Ohana guest today has made frequent trips to the World Championships in both long distance and 70.3. She has numerous pro finishes on the podium at both distances and has topped the Ironman podium 3 times. In 2016, she became the first woman to win an Ultraman distance race outright when she won the Ultra 520K Canada race. The following year, she went on to become the women's champion in Kona at the Ultraman World Championships. Joining me today from her home in Perth, Australia, while I sit here in her Canadian home, it's Keat Bevilaqua. Welcome.
Hello. Yeah, I was wondering if I could recognize the room in the background. I'm like, what's that?
Well, it is pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago.
It's good to see some things haven't changed.
Yeah. Yeah, you are actually the person in the Ultra Ohana that I've known the longest, other than my ex Lucy, because in a twist of fate and small worlds, back in July of 2004, we met ever so briefly in Perth as we exchanged lives for a year. You were a PE teacher at Christchurch Grammar School, and I was teaching here in Burnaby, and we did a teacher exchange. And so we didn't really get to know each other, but we exchanged lives for a year.
I know, it was crazy. I don't know anything about you at all. I think after I came back from that year at teacher exchange, all my work colleagues knew so much more about you than I did, because obviously I don't get to see you live your life for a year, but I don't know anything about you. And was that actually when you got into triathlon when you came to Perth? Was your whole exposure?
Not me. That's when Lucy got into triathlon when we came to Perth. Yeah, and she did her first couple of triathlons there and joined a women's triathlon club, and that leaded her to it. And I was always the tag along.
We always need to tag along.
Yes. So, just along those lines, what are your memories of teaching in Canada compared to Australia? Was there anything that stood out to you?
I think, and it'll be interesting to hear what you say as well, but I think for us, our experiences were very different because the schools that we taught at were very different. Mm-hmm. The school I was teaching at in Perth was, a private, prestigious, all-boys school. I was very lucky. It was a great job and I enjoyed working there. And to go to your school and your environment in Vancouver and having to walk through a metal detector some days to go to the school was just something I had not experienced. And it was a very different cultural experience for me and school environment experience. But at the same time, I was still able to take away, so much and so many friends and great memories of it. So it was completely different for me. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made to do that. The greatest life experience I could have had. Yeah.
Yeah, I will totally agree with that. That was a great life experience for the whole family, for us. I don't think we've ever had metal detectors in our school, though. Maybe it felt like that, but
We feel like that some days, yes.
yeah. Now, when you returned back from the teacher exchange, you still continued teaching at Christchurch for a little bit before you turned pro. But it was only shortly after that when you turned pro. What was there a particular race, or was there something happening in your life at that time that you decided, I'm going to give up the teaching gig here for a while and take a shot at going pro?
Yeah, it was never something that was on my radar. Like I was never involved in triathlon or was chasing goals of going professional. And when I first came over to Vancouver for the teacher exchange, I just qualified for Kona that year as an age grouper in 2004, and went to that race from Vancouver. Didn't have a great day. It was a fantastic experience, but I pretty much was like, okay, I'm out. I'm done with triathlon after that race in that October. And I took some time off and enjoyed, my time while I was in Vancouver. But then the following year, while I was still there in the January, February, I started thinking, oh, maybe I could have done a little bit better. And I contacted my coach in Perth, and he started coaching me again. I went to Coeur d'Alene and raced there, qualified for Kona again in 2005 as an age grouper, and I finished third in my age group. And so when I returned to Australia after the exchange, my coach said to me, oh, do you know you've automatically qualified for a professional license? And I was like, oh, I don't understand what that means. And there's certain standards in Australia for a pro license, and one of them was if you podiumed at a world champs. And so we discussed it and said that maybe we would take it for 1 year and see what it was like and what the experience was like. And I continued to teach full time. So that was in 2006 was the first year that I went pro. I did the same in all of 2006. And then in 2007, I took some leave from teaching. I took 3 months off and went and stayed in Boulder, Colorado. We're all triathletes, we're all athletes.
Everybody goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the experience like there in Boulder with all these, it's a mecca of triathlon. So what was your experience like there?
It is a mecca of triathlon, and look, it's even more so a mecca now than it was in 2007. And the training was great, and it's at altitude. I came from Perth. I was at sea level. You're surrounded by elite athletes. It's very difficult not to improve, but I did find it a little bit hard not to have a bit more of a balance, because it was pretty much 100%. All in every day, and it did feel like quite a little bit competitive from where I'd come from. But it was a great experience for me to have to be full time for the first time for 3 months and be able to just travel to lots of different races. And then at that time, I also met a couple of brothers, John and Jeff Schultz, who we got along really well. And it was after meeting them the following year, I ended up going back to Boise, Idaho, and spent 12 years there for 6 months of the year. So, that sort of did set me up. And I did gain a lot of fitness, but there was also there was a big learning curve for me. Yeah.
And one of those times that you have professed to having a big learning curve was the 2008 Ironman New Zealand. Can you tell us about your Ironman New Zealand, where I believe you came second in that race?
I did, and I still, when people ask me, my career is heading towards 20 years soon of professional racing, and they ask me one of the highlights. Even though I came second, that for me is still one of my highlight races. Coming off that time away in Boulder and then coming back to Perth, I had gained some fitness and we kept building on it. But it had only been a couple of years, but I still hadn't had a race where I thought, oh man, maybe I could really, maybe I could be a professional triathlete. I still just didn't have that confidence or the belief that I deserved to be there. And then in 2008, when I went to Ironman New Zealand, I had raced in January at the Port of Tarawera half in New Zealand as a bit of a lead-up race and won that. So it gave me a little bit of confidence. And then going into the Ironman, I had a fantastic battle with Joanna Lawn. We still laugh about it now. She's the queen of Ironman New Zealand and always will be. And we had a great race. We ran side by side for probably 21, 22 Ks in the marathon. And there's a little kicker of a hill that a few Ks from the finish. She knows it like, anybody else. And that's where she put on a surge and was able to break me. But it was, again, like I said, just the race where I was like, oh, wow, I can do this. Like, I think I deserve and belong to be here. And maybe it's time to think about committing a bit more time. Yeah.
Now that kind of leads into you getting to your first Ironman podium then. And that was only a short while later when it's going into your backyard and your hometown race. Because where did that one happen?
So that happened in 2010. After 2008, having that great race in New Zealand, we talked about the learning experiences I had from Boulder. Unfortunately, like 8 weeks later, I got a stress fracture in my sacrum, and it had been building, obviously, over time and things that I had been doing. And so that really put me out for nearly 12 to 18 months. It took quite a long time to heal. And then I was excited to come back in 2010 and just started doing a lot of races. We thought that was better because I consider myself a trainer. Like, I love to train. Like, you get me to train, I'm happy. Get to a race, I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Once I'm started, I'm fine. But definitely a trainer. So we were putting in a lot more races to try and help with that. But also that was a way to break up my training.
Right.
And in 2010, we had the system for professional athletes that you accumulated points over the year. And if you had enough points, then you qualified for Kona. So doing a lot of races was a good thing because you got more points.
Right.
So I had accumulated enough points, went to Kona in 2010. Again, Kona has just been my nemesis. Not a great race, but felt like I had some fitness. So threw myself on the start line of Ironman Western Australia because it was just down the road. And found myself leading the race, which was just unbelievable. I don't necessarily have any regrets, but I was just so excited to be leading the last like 10 Ks or so. I was, waving to the crowd, couldn't get the smile off my face, although I had Rebecca Keat running me down. And I was just not drinking. I was not eating. I was not focusing on where I was and what I should be doing. So the last couple of Ks, I was quite delusional, and coming down the finishing chute, was crawling, like grabbing railings, and literally did my finish line photo of my first Ironman victory is me crawling over the line and laying on the ground. And so it's not the whole big, yay, hands up, celebrate, you won an Ironman and it's your home race. There was none of that. I just was laying on the ground thinking, okay, it's done. I'm not moving. I'm not moving ever again. Like, I can retire now. But it's a fantastic one to have ticked off on one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure there was a ton of fans there for you as well, being in the backyard. I did go back and watch that video prior to doing this conversation today. And yeah, that's, you are literally crawling across the finish line. I think it might've been that ramp at the end of that they put at these Ironman finishes that stopped you from being able to lift your legs.
Well, that's right. And the funny thing is, Shane Smith was the race director at Ironman West Australia that year, and he owns and runs a company called Triathlon, which Guy and I do some sports tour leading work for him. And last year he happened to bring up, when we were away with him, that he didn't put the ramp up ever again after that year. You remember seeing me come up the ramp, and he's like, oh no, this was a bad idea. So, at least I've made that better for other people.
And you've also won the 70.3 down there as well, right? In Busselton. Yeah,
that took me a while. That was very frustrating because it was, a big, after winning Ironman WA, it was a big goal to get the double, especially being local. And I was getting seconds, thirds, and I was just like, oh, man. And then 20, was 2013, 2014. I did come away with the victory. So I was like, oh, finally, now I can stop that one too.
And you've had two other podiums in the Ironman. You did Korea in 2011 and Louisville in 2013. So, is there anything that stands out from those two races that were important to you in your career?
Yeah, they were both very different races. Korea was coming off. I'd gone to Lanzarote to do Ironman Lanzarote in May and been stung by a bee, and I have a bit of an allergic reaction to them. And so I didn't finish the race, was, disappointed, came back to the US, to Boise. And my coach was like, you know what, you've got this for your fitness. We need to just jump into another race. There was a 70.3 on the same time, which was great. Guy came over and did the 70.3. I did the Ironman. And I remember him yelling at me with a 10Ks to go, and I had the lead, and he was like, you walk every aid station, like you need to eat and drink, like I don't want you crawling over the line. So I was getting constant reminders to make sure I do the right thing. And Louisville would have to have been the best finish line. Like it was amazing because it's enclosed down the main street, and it's got balconies that had people on tops of balconies down the bottom. So it was just the most incredible finish line and location to be part of for an Ironman. And every victory in particular is special, but in every finish line has got some sort of story behind it.
Yeah. And then the World Championships. So you said that's a bit of a nemesis for you. You did 2 as an age grouper and 2 as a pro, if I read that correctly in the diary.
No, I've done 4, I think now. But yeah, I've just, for some reason, there's something about that race that I had a great race there as an age grouper. And obviously the second time I went, and I did have a good race the first time I went as a pro. And since then it's just been a bit of a struggle. And I went again last year thinking it would be different, but it wasn't. Sorry, the year before. But I'm a little bit older now, and I'm quite happy to be doing different races and different events, and enjoying the experiences, chasing that a lot more so now than podiums.
Right. Yeah. Well, as an age grouper going in there, I guess you're trying to achieve your best time, and then as a pro, you're racing your competitors. Does that in any way change your approach to the racing or the training that leads up to the racing?
Yeah, that's a really good point. But I don't think in my case it would change how I prepared for the race, because at the end of the day, I can really only do what I can do, what my body's capable of doing. So that's not going to change all that much for me. And I think if someone who's at a different point in their career, it probably would, because the result's going to make a big difference for them.
Mm-hmm. And you were just saying that you are interested now in finding interesting races, perhaps rather than chasing podiums. Are there races coming up that you're going to do that are new to you now, or that you're going back to because you've enjoyed in the past?
Bit of both. So yes, I am going back to New Zealand this year, and that is because it's the 40th anniversary of the race, which is fantastic. And that race holds a special place for me. I've done it, I think it's 5 times now. It's Guy's home race, so we get to go back and visit his family as well, because he's from New Zealand. It's a great community, run event, and it's been a long time since we've done it. So we're, quite excited to be returning to be part of that. And then obviously these local races that we picked to the Busso 100 is on, and we have Carry Valley that's on. And then the second half of the year, we'll look at doing some events that hopefully, new ones, or ones that we like returning to. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a favorite place that you've gone to in the world? Maybe not because of the result that you had, but because of the race and the atmosphere that was there?
There's a lot. Like last year, we returned to Phuket Triathlon in November, which we hadn't been to for a while, and we weren't in any shape to be going to do a race, but it's easy for us to get to from Perth. And the race and the atmosphere and the crowd and just the whole, it was only a quick trip, 4 days, was as good, if not better, than we remember going, all those years ago. So we were like, wow, why haven't we been back again? So that one is always, it was always a good, fun event. But, I like racing locally. And again, we're going back to New Zealand because I enjoy going there. At the end of the day, like you said, I think it's the people, number one, that make the experience, and then the places, yeah. Mm-hmm. I can easily forget about a result.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the Ironman New Zealand, and we're recording this in January. But if this is on schedule, it is going to be, this episode is being released the day before you are racing in New Zealand. So everybody who's listening, actually, for a lot of people, it will be the same day because it'll be in New Zealand and you're ahead of us. So
yeah, they are.
So everybody, when you're done listening to the podcast, go look up and see how Keat did in the race.
No
is Guy also racing?
Yes, he is. Yes.
Look them both up and see how they did in the race. You're talking about how, the people are important to you now when you go to races, and people who go to the 5:15 races, the Ultraman races. That's usually the thing that they talk about. That's the reason why I've gone back so many times, even though I don't race in them. I was the crew member for Lucy, and we both kept going back when she wasn't racing and crewing. It's because of the people that you meet. I would just talking to Ross Welton for an episode that was released a few weeks ago, season 5, episode 7, who raced with you. Like, he's one of those people that I still connect with, and still, I went and stayed with him in Europe. So the Ultra 520 race, I'm sure you have some people that you've met there. You had a different perspective on that race than he did in that year because you were the champion. For the people that were there watching you race, it looked like you were just running a perfect race. You're a pro coming in with all your pro knowledge. Tell us a little bit about how the race went for you in Canada when you did your first Ultra.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that at all, to be honest. Yeah, so it's funny how things have changed. Every time I've done 3, and each time things have been different leading into them. But I had always wanted to do an Ultraman. It had been on my radar for many, many years. And as a professional triathlete, the timing is always I think important, and it just never fit. And eventually I was like, okay, enough's enough. We're just going to go do it. And I love Canada, obviously. And we could drive there from Boise, so that made it easy. But I raced an Ironman. I feel like I went back to Lanzorte in May. And then we really just did a targeted 10 to 12 week build leading into the race of just increasing, that bike and run volume. How the race played out for me, the swim, that swim was beautiful. And Guy wore his nappy, which we still have photos of and laugh. He was my paddler. And he said, I can't last that long. They made him wear a nappy, which was pretty funny. I had, my best friend Ruth Chang came over, and Marion came with her, and then Jeff Schilt was coaching me at the time, so he came as well. And day one was fine because day one was, I'd been doing Ironmans, and so to swim, 10Ks and ride, wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Day 2.
Yeah, you had you had a 10-minute lead over Dustin Gilbert of the USA after day 1. So yeah, I'm guessing day 1 was pretty good for you.
Yeah. Day 2, probably the first half was okay. And then I started to hit a wall, and I was just like, oh man, I haven't prepared properly for this. I'm not ready. I was just lacking in energy, and there was a point that I stopped, I got off the bike, and I sat at the back of the minivan with my crew. And I was like, oh man, I've still got a long way to go. Like I think I've still had 100 Ks to go. This is not going to be a great day. They gave me a Red Bull, which did help. And they said, look, you go, let's just keep pedaling. You've got the mental capacity normally for things like that. So you just need to switch off and keep going. So I was able to do that. But then with about 50 Ks to go, my Di2 went flat. So I wasn't able to change my gears. And it was the out and back section where you had like a headwind and a tailwind one way. So I was spinning out. And so then I stopped again and they plugged my Di2 into a portable charger just enough to change the gears so that I wasn't spinning out. But then when I had to go into the headwind, we stopped, plugged it in again, changed it again so I could change the gears. So that was causing a bit of an issue. And it was just that last 50 Ks took me forever. And by the time we finished day 2, I wasn't very happy. I was like, this was a bad idea. We went straight. Yeah.
So at the end of day 2,
yeah.
Dustin Gilbert of the US had passed you, I guess, at some point during the day because he had like a 5-minute lead going into day 3. Now, I seem to remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know like nutrition is a big part of these races, and I'm not sure exactly what your nutrition plan was. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. But I seem to remember someone saying that you were actually like setting alarms to get up at night to eat to make sure you were getting enough calories back in. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we I had one of my crew members during the day who was recording everything I was eating, roughly, because obviously if I threw a bottle back, it may have a quarter left in it. So she just took a guess, and things like that. So she was calculating trying to calculate how close as she can what I was eating during the day. And then at the end of the day, we looked at my Garmin and saw how much I'd burnt, and then we looked at the difference. And my immediate goal was to even that out. So straight away, as soon as I finished, they were giving me food to try to even that. And then I would start the carbo load for the next day. But I wasn't necessarily setting alarms because I would wake up a couple of times during the night and go to the bathroom. So I would always have food, like I had a banana next to my bed or a sandwich and an electrolyte drink and water. So I was actually constantly eating continuously throughout the night. So I was always topping up my stores. And I did that, I did that the night before we started and then the next 2 nights as well. And I've always done that. I used to do that for Ironman as well, and then definitely did it for Ultraman. Because I remember I spoke to Hillary before I did my first one, Hillary Biscay, and it was just I think people underestimated the calories and the food that you need, and it's not that you can get away without it. Like you can totally do it without having as much as we do. But if you want to perform better, then you can by eating more. And that's what's happening now with Ironman. They're talking about, athletes having 100 grams of carbs an hour during an Ironman race because they're just going faster. And I know we're not going as fast, but we can still be training our bodies to take in, that more hydration and nutrition. So, and so that, I was actually doing that. But after day 2 in Canada, we picked up my bike, went and got pizza, went and got apple pie, went straight back to our unit and where we were staying. Guy and I were in run room. The crew were in the room next to us. And literally I just ate and, rested while they got everything for the next day. I remember I literally had a little cry with Guy because I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to run 84 Ks. Like I cannot, in my mind, I cannot run 84 Ks tomorrow. Like this is just going to be the worst thing ever.
Had you run 84K before that?
No, I hadn't. I'd only run 50 Ks. So 50 Ks was my max. and I hadn't even run, I don't even think I'd run 100K weeks for that race. Like I hadn't even done 100K in a week or anything like that.
And what did you guys have planned out as a running strategy, as far as pace or walk run, or what was the kind of strategy you had? And did you have to change it based on how tight the race was?
We originally did talk about like a walk run, and we had a few different plans, but at the end it was like, well, we'll just start and see how it goes, and then and we'll adjust as we go along. So I got up in the morning and I couldn't stomach my normal breakfast because I just felt so sick about what I was about to do. So I actually had leftover pizza and cold apple pie, which obviously was fine, didn't make a difference. And then we started running. And the start of the run was really enjoyable because it was a group of us that were all running together and we were chatting, and I felt like it was good for me because it made everything relaxing, and I didn't go out too hard, thinking that it was 21K. It was all really controlled, and that first part, well, in particular, the first like 30 odd Ks, went by a lot quicker than I had expected. And that was the road section before it goes into the
gravel. Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. Yep. And I ran the whole first marathon. I didn't stop. And it felt okay. So we just continued, obviously my crew were amazing. I'd spoken to people that had done Ultraman before, and there's so many different ways you can do it. There's no right or wrong way. Obviously, it's what works for you. But for me, I like to have my crew and see them quite often, even on the bike. I'm seeing them every 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, not every 10 to 15. They're there all the time. And for the run, I was swapping out. I didn't have anyone run with me for the first marathon, but at the second marathon, my crew members were swapping out every 2Ks. So they would run 2Ks and swap, 2Ks and swap. And so we had that plan in place. And then I do remember halfway through the second marathon, Steve was located on the side of the road with his microphone.
As Steve does, yeah.
And the car went by at the same time, and they said, if you keep running, because I wasn't leading the run, I was second.
Juan Arroyo was, I think, leading the run because he finished first overall in the run. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was told if I keep holding that pace, that I would win, and then you'd be the first female to win overall. And I just turned to Guy and I said, I can't even think about that right now. I said, I just have to make sure that I can keep running the next K, and then we'll worry about the next K. I said, I can't even think about that. I've still got 22 Ks to go, and the second half is more rolling and hillier than the first. So it was
despite you not thinking about it, I'm sure your crew were frantically doing computations in the car, trying to figure out if you were gaining, losing, or holding with Juan to see where you would finish. Because at that point, Dustin, who was leading the race, had a slower run, and I'm sure you were probably aware that he was dropped off to the point where, unless he came back really hard, wasn't going to be. It was you and Juan now racing in the run.
Yeah, and it's not the sort of things you want to hear, like 70 Ks into an 84K run. You need to keep going. And just little things, inexperienced things like my watch died, so I didn't have my watch. But so my crew were able, who was running with me, just continued to give me the splits every K we were going through, and you get towards the end and you're like, oh, the corner's here. The finish line's just, no, it's not. Okay, must be the next corner. No, it's not. Oh, gosh, where is that? So I was pleasantly surprised, and it was an amazing experience. I don't know how people do multiple in a year. I don't know how Simon did 3 last year. I really don't. And it mentally and physically takes a lot more out of me.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ultra Tri-Fest Canada, where you can race the traditional 515, a 515 relay, or a 515 non-stop. There's also a 360K format, which does not require a crew. And because we are hosting you in Whistler, there is also an Ultra Gravel Race. Check us out at ultratrifestcanada.com. And if you've always wanted to go to a 515 World Championship, check out the information on the website about our new Worldwide Championships, which is available to every 515 racer of all time. Again, that is at ultratrifestcanada.com, coming to Whistler, British Columbia in August 2024. Simon Cochrane, who's now setting records, crazy for Ultraman. I assumed you would have been following him, and a fellow New Zealander to Guy. What do you think about what he's done in this realm of ultra triathlon, and do you actually know him personally?
I do actually know him, and I remember talking to him. Because when I did Ultraman Australia, it got cancelled due to COVID, and then it got moved to the next year. We weren't sure it was going to be on, and he was thinking about doing it. So, and obviously traveling from another country was putting it under, it was risky. So he was putting it off. And I do remember saying to him, look, I think everyone knew that he would be good at it. We're like, well, I think you're going to be really good at it. And I saw him in February last year, before Ultraman Australia, at Tarawera, and he was talking about it. And I actually was there last year, so I'm not surprised, because I think that we knew he would be that good, but it's just impressive that he can do it, and like I said, and back it up, like just so consistent. With what he does, especially the running, like it's
incredibly fast.
Yeah. And it's, I think we'll see more and more of that, and you'll see more, just athletes or just people in general coming over to do the ultra, because they're looking for something different, and it provides that.
Yeah, and I had him on season 4, episode 8. And when I was talking to him about nutrition, I'm like, it's a little bit different and ultra. And he's like, no, I'm just going to do the same thing as I do for an Ironman 3 days. And I guess for him, it works because he's still finishing the day so quickly. He's not taking the 12 hours to finish a day, or, 9-10 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's true. And also the fact that I think he's also going at probably a higher intensity than a lot of other people. So where others can, potentially have a Vegemite sandwich or have more solid foods and things like that, with the intensity that he's racing it now. Then the Ironman nutrition is perfect.
Yeah. And he had to come over to do Ultraman Canada before getting invited to go to the Worlds. Unlike you, who somehow snuck their way into Ultraman Worlds after a 520K Canada.
I feel like I may have been the last person to be able to do that.
I think you may have been, yeah. What did you learn in Canada? Because you're always learning, and I think you talked about some of the things that went wrong for you in Canada, despite the fact that everybody thought it went perfect. What kind of things did you learn in Canada that then helped you in Hawaii to go there and become the women's champion at the World Championship?
So just backing up a little bit with what you said about getting into the World Champs. I had originally, when I signed up for Canada, it was Ultraman Canada. So it was during the time that I had registered for the event that it actually changed. So Steve had contacted me and said, look, this is the situation now. And I said, no, I'm still committed. This is what I want to do. So I feel like that had been taken a little bit into consideration with being able to go to
That's when Steve Brown was doing the Ultraman Canada and switched it over to Ultra 520 when he left the branding. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so then I had to explain to Simon, yeah, you might have to do another. Might have to do another one, which was fine. I mean, why not? You can do it.
Yeah.
But Hawaii, for me, again, I had spent some time on the island with the Ironman, and I was going but not racing leading up to the event. So I had a good opportunity to ride quite a bit of the course, which really helped. But again, I would say it was, I took away my learnings from Canada, but there were still things that I was like, oh man, like, did I really do that? Or I should have done this, that I used again for Ultraman Australia, which I feel like has probably been the best of my 3 times I've done an Ultraman. And nutrition wise, not necessarily too bad. But I probably went into the run a little bit overconfident, so I ran too hard to start with, and I didn't have a great run. Like I definitely should have run, 20 to 30 minutes quicker than I did on that day. And so I really paid for going out too hard in the first marathon. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from that. And that course and that wet, like one side of the island, you're boiling hot, and the next side, we had pouring rain. I had like jackets and leg warmers on for, the long ride on day 2 that I didn't end up taking off. So it's like they say, the island has, every climate of the world in it, and you pretty much get it when you do that course. So I did come away with the victory. And I was, very glad and very happy with that, but it wasn't, it hadn't quite hit where I thought I was capable of doing.
Yeah. And the year previous, 2015, Hillary Biscay had won the race that year. Had you gone back to her again before going to Hawaii to seek specific Hawaii advice, or did you already get that when talking to her earlier?
No, I was seeing her in Hawaii every year at the Ironman World Champs. Even if we weren't racing, we were there. So I was always picking her brain with questions about, the course and, strategies and things you could do, and little things like, so I didn't do it in Hawaii, and, not every athlete would think about it. But in Ultraman Australia, after day 2, after long ride day, there was a pool where we were staying. I actually got in the pool and just went for a swim and, a splash around for 15 to 20 minutes. Like it was like an active recovery session. And it's not something you would think about doing during an Ultraman normally. But it was amazing how much mentally and physically it made me feel better after that day. Even if it's just a few percent, that would help for the running the next day.
And you did, I guess, put it all together in your 2021 race at Ultraman Australia, because your time there was a 23:17, which won the women's race. Again, you were 4th overall, but that is like the second fastest 5:15 race by a woman anywhere, anytime, next to, of course, the Ultraman Florida race of Dee Dee Griesbauer. So you must have been very happy that you finally got to the race that you wanted.
I was, because that one took me a couple of years to get to, due to COVID. So I'd committed to the race in 2020 and a really big build up to it. And then the race was cancelled only a few weeks out. So I was like, oh man, I just did so much work. And our entry rolled over, but I was struggling to recommit. I was just, because I'd put so much into that race that didn't go on. And so I left it till the very last minute. Was still, obviously I'm still locally racing, and I did 100K on the road for the first time in the January. So I knew I had sort of okay fitness. But then between Guy and I, we sat down and just did a very concentrated, like 12-week block and said, right, we're in and we're going. And again, that nearly didn't happen because the weekend before was Busselton was on.
Oh, yeah.
And we were in Busselton, and during the race, at the end of the race, there'd been a COVID outbreak and the city was shutting down, and we were flying out on the Monday, and this was Saturday night. And we were and I said to Guy, we're going back to Perth now. We are getting on a plane. So we drove straight back to Perth, packed up everything. I wasn't even organised, just packed everything up and got on a plane and flew to Brisbane as soon as possible and just hoped that they would let us in the state. And once we were in, I was like, okay, we're on. We're actually on. This is actually happening. I'm getting to. So it was good. There were a few little things. And, you know, there was a strong current in the swim and, you know, there's, you know, this and that, but I am happy with how that race went. And, you know, it was, the nutrition went well. You know, I made an error. We went off a little bit off course on the run course. It wouldn't have probably cost me third place overall, not fourth, because in the end that was a matter of seconds. But it was really good to finally be like, oh, okay. That's what it should have been like. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now that you've put that race together, I know you're still racing Ironman races. Do you think there's any more Ultraman races in your future?
I think I do want to do one more. Yes. Yeah. I've been talking about it for a while, and at the end of last year, I said to guys, I feel like I want to do one more. I said, it could be the worst decision I ever make or not, who knows? Yeah, so I need to decide, and I want it to be one I haven't done before. So, because I like going to new destinations and new locations. Yeah. So it will, you know, it'll be in the next 12 to 18 months for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've heard of a new one that you probably haven't been to before. That's happening in Whistler.
I know, I've heard of too. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't make it this year. So I'll be keeping an eye on it, see how it goes.
Yeah.
I can imagine that would be a brutal course.
It will be a very challenging course. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the good thing, the good thing about the course is because it's in the Sea to Sky corridor, the Valley of Whistler, anywhere you go up, you get to come back down. So,
right. Yeah. I'll be following along with a lot of interest in August.
All right. You've been doing a lot of talk about your husband, Guy, throughout this episode, and I know that he's also a pro triathlete. You've gone into coaching business together. So I want to talk a little bit about your coaching with the GK Endurance. But first, maybe let's find out a little bit more about Guy. How well do you know his professional resume? Can you give us a few highlights from it?
I should know it, shouldn't I? A few highlights. Wow. He won Taiwan 70.3, and he's also had he wants to have a good Ironman. He does actually enjoy the Ironman distance. He's just still trying to crack it. So he's very fast still for a 45-year-old. The young kids here in Perth love racing him because it's still a battle. And he enjoys it. They keep him, feeling a bit younger and faster as well. So he did his first Ironman in 2010. So we actually met in Kona, and he came over to Perth to see me at the end of 2010, and he'd just been doing some halves, and he said, I'm going to come do the Ironman. He hadn't even trained for it. And came over and did Ironman Western Australia. And that was the one that I won. So after that, I was like, he was hooked after that.
And were you guys kind of officially dating at that time, or was he just coming to Australia to try and hook you in?
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say we were online dating because we hadn't spent too much time together. So I'd say we were online dating, and then by the time he left Perth, we were officially dating, and then 2 months later he moved to Perth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So and look, it's been great because it's fantastic to be able to travel the world and do what you do together. And we spent, pre-COVID 6 months of the year living in Boise, Idaho, and then 6 months of the year in Perth. I've tried to convince him to do some sort of ultra, but he refused. He says not running any further than a marathon. He said, I'm not running any further than a marathon. Maybe I can get him to do a 355, like maybe 50 Ks.
Yeah. That sounds like a plan. Good.
Yeah.
And then how did the two of you decide to go into the coaching realm? Was it something that you actively talked about and wanted to pursue, or was it like people were coming to you guys? How did it all kind of develop?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. So he has a teaching human movement sports science degree as well. So we both have same qualifications. He just didn't actually teach he was in sports management and things like that. And I was already coaching just a few people on the side, and then he was getting people asking him as well. So we talked about, making it a little bit more official and doing something with it. And then it's just grown on its own since then. And it was always something that we had talked about doing. And it's been great because predominantly it's online. So it still allows us to do what we want to do. And because we can do it anywhere. But we have a great group of athletes, and we have some additional coaches that are here in Perth and on deck with us as well. And it's just awesome to be surrounded by people that are chasing their goals and positive and reinforcing and doing the same thing that you like to do. And we really encourage. We want it to be a lifestyle. Like we want it to be something that they enjoy to do day in, day out. Year after year. We don't tend to have too many people that come to us for just one race or just 5 or 6 months and then they're gone. We're definitely more of a in it for a good time.
Yeah. And so would you say a majority of your clientele then are online people that are in other places, or is it mainly Perth based? Do you do like group workouts in Perth or camps, or is it more global than local?
It's definitely, we are global, so we do have athletes all over the world. And depending, I like to specialize in the ultra distance events. So if I do tend to get more of those, which is great because that sort of stuff really excites me.
Yeah.
Our biggest group is in Perth. Over the summer we run one group session on a Thursday morning. We run a bike interval session at 5:30 for an hour and a half. But that's it. We don't tend to run any other group sessions. We do special training weekends leading into races. So we have those, or every now and then, like this Sunday, we're doing sweat testing so they can come down and get some sweat testing done. And we do run camps. So every year, we generally run a local camp and then maybe an overseas camp or race. So this year we are going to Tarawera in Phuket for a week in July. Which is get out of our Perth winter, and so the athletes will come over and spend a week there, and we'll coach them. A bit of everything.
Yeah. And what do you think that you guys offer that might be different than other coaches, if anything? Like people listening right now are like, oh, Keat knows ultra, and maybe I want to see what she's all about and go over there. Is there something that you sell yourselves on, or what? Tell me a little bit about that part.
It's a good question, because when people come to us and they said, oh, we're just inquiring about your coaching. I think there are a lot of great coaches out there. Mm-hmm. There are, so many coaches, and it's just, you have to talk to them, because sometimes you're after a certain personality, or sometimes you're after, a certain structure. But I do like to, if I was talking about me personally, then I believe that, the experience in particular that I've had over half Ironman, like ultra distance racing, 20 plus years of trying and experimenting with things myself, and, that sort of thing is something that I can offer and say, look, you can do it this way, you can do it this. There's so many options. So the biggest thing I would say, number one, is experience that we have, but we also have qualifications. We're not just saying, hey, we're good coaches because we're pro athletes, because I don't think every pro athlete will make a good coach. We've spent 10 days at the Australian Institute of Sport and done the professional coaching courses to make sure that we have that knowledge, and we will continually try and talk to other coaches around Australia or around the world. If we're at races or if we're at events, we like to pick their brains about, what are you doing now? Like, what would you do in this situation? So we're always trying to educate ourselves. Like,
right.
Things are changing or evolving all the time. So.
And would it be correct in saying that you kind of offer, a steady, like, here's a plan, go with it, up to here's a customized plan, to here's one-on-one? Do you do that kind of stuff? And is your one-on-one? Do you and Guy keep separate clients, or do you get both of you if you go one-on-one?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, so at the moment we are all one-on-one. Like our coaching is all personalized one-on-one.
Okay.
We only take a certain number of clients each for Guy and I. We do have separate clients, and because it depends on who they are, what they want, what they're training for. But at the same time, yes, you'll have one of us as your point of contact, but we are always talking to each other about, hey, I've got this situation. What do you think I do here? Guy loves the tech side of everything, aerodynamics on the bikes. What are the fastest tires? What are people doing with this? So any of that sort of stuff, he's the one that we'll talk to about that. Even me, swimming, he's an excellent swimmer, triathlon wise. So we both have our different strengths that we use. So by default, any of our athletes would get both. We are in the process of getting onto the here is a plan that you can use for the next 10 to 12 weeks.
Right.
But our focus on our one-on-one clients, and we're in the middle of summer, so that's sort of just on the back burner for a minute.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Now, looking ahead into the future of triathlon, since you're in this obviously for a lifetime and a lifestyle, where do you kind of see the future of triathlon going, like specifically pro triathlon maybe, with the rising costs of traveling these days, the flights, the hotels? The pros aren't paying these entry fees like the age groupers are, but pros are relying on sponsorships. Those aren't so readily available to all the pros. I think they probably go to the pointy end. Do you see maybe Ironman putting more money into this prizing and spreading it out over a bigger field? Where do you see the future of pro triathlon going, or is it going to cost itself out and shrink down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think pre-COVID, I felt like the sport was taking a bit of a dive, and this is not necessarily just in the professional ranks. This is just overall numbers wise. I don't know what it felt like in Canada, but things weren't selling out, waiting to the very end. Since then, no, like all of a sudden, events sell out. You've got to get in quickly. So participation wise, overall is definitely increasing. In terms of professional athletes, again, that number's increasing as well, and the competition's increasing. We've got a lot more short course athletes now coming over to half. Eventually, they go over to Ironman. The whole standard is going up, which is fantastic for the sport. But yeah, the big picture is how do not the top tier athletes, make a living, and PTO was set up to try and help that. And I think overall they had the right idea, but then they changed things, and I'm not sure if that's in the right direction. So originally, I think the first year, the top 100, if you were at the top 100 at the end of the year, you'd get a bit of money at the end of the year. Now that's gone down to the top 50, so only the top 50 get a bit of money. And so how is that helping anyone who's new coming into the sport, get any better or get the experience or get into the races? The PTO series is great, but you're only having those top 20 or 30. Can there not be another 10 that are in that 50 to 100? So they at least then get the experience to race at that level, or, the opportunity to make money. Right. So I feel like you said, the top tier are doing great, but that is just so small now. And it's just, you've got top age groupers that have more sponsors than a professional triathlete. Like, they will, because they'll put the names all over their top and they'll get free product, and sponsors are like, that's all we need. We don't need to be paying out any money for podiums or bonuses if we can get all this coverage here. So it's a business that's changing, and I think it's a lot more difficult than it used to be. I wouldn't like to be a new pro right now.
Well, even in your days, I'm sure you paid most of your way, right? Like, your sponsors or any prize money you got weren't paying for it. You were doing it for the love.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it has to be, like I did work, I was teaching for, 8 years or so before I quit that completely. So I did have savings that I was using. But there was never, you always worked at a loss.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I remember we had, Guy and I both had K-Swiss as one of our sponsors in, and those years when K-Swiss was involved, there was some good money and some good podium bonuses and things like that. Mm-hmm. You just don't see that as much anymore. So you have to, I feel like some athletes don't realize that, unfortunately, you are a business. So you need to, sell yourself as a business and realize that the sponsor's going to help you if you explain to them how you can help them. It has to work both ways. Otherwise, they're not interested.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Olympic athletes that aren't in the professional sports. Yeah. So where is it going to go? Well, I mean, it's great. I think it's fantastic that Ironman's jumped on, and now they have the series as well. So we have the professional races for Ironman, for pro athletes, but there is also the Ironman series, and they've selected a number of Ironman and half Ironman races. So that's great, because the PTO is only the 100 distance, whereas the Ironman covers the longer distance, as well as the half. So that opens it up to a lot more athletes to get involved in that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what is your feeling on the challenge? Do you think they're going to go the same way, or?
So actually, Guy and I actually do quite a lot of challenge races, because we enjoy them. They normally run really well. They have a great environment. They look after their professional athletes. So they may get involved. And there's a lot more races you can do for challenge now. So they do have, obviously, they have the championship race that you can go do in Samarin. So there is like a series, but it's not any different for the professional athletes at the moment. But yeah, we enjoy doing guided challenge Wanaka last year. We did challenge Ironman Coeur. We've done challenge Taiwan multiple times. So I think it's good now that there are the different series that creates a bit of competition.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the other one I got to ask you as a pro triathlete is, what is your feeling on the division of the World Championship?
I knew that one was coming. So I was there over the 2 days. I was there when it was over 2 days. And then I was there last year when it was just the ladies. It's not the same. Like, it's definitely not the same. It is fantastic that the women get, their own day and have the focus on them and the focus on the race, because it was amazing racing. But if you have, husband and wife, you can't, unless you've got a lot of money, one can't go to Nice and one go to Hawaii or so. Like, that makes it very difficult. And there is now a lot more availability to be able to go. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Are there, you go to a race, an Ironman, and they give out slots, and not all those slots are going. Right. So they've made the rules and that's the way it is. And so I would, if I have any athletes that want to go, I'd be like, well, you take your slot. Like it doesn't matter. Like this is what the rules are. And if the opportunity is there, take it.
Yeah.
But is it the same? I don't feel like it's the same that it used to be.
The last one I want to ask you then is, when you do retire from the active racing, yes. Obviously you'll continue on with the coaching. It's your lifestyle. Do you see any future in perhaps broadcasting? Like Dee Dee does, like she does a great job with all her experience, and
it does. Absolutely. Well, I'll never retire from racing. I will always race. Like Guy and I have big plans as age groupers. We're going out to have lots of fun and do these particular races we've picked out. We're going to go do as age groupers. And that's probably a couple of years down the track, maybe. It depends, because he's 2 years younger than me. So he's like, you need to keep going. Yeah. But I do commentating. So I commentate. I've done Ironman WA. I've done Busso. I do some local events here. So I do get into the commentary. If the opportunity arises, absolutely. I enjoy what I do, and I love knowing what's going on and having the knowledge. So, yeah, if the opportunity came up, I would definitely do it for sure.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, Keat, I want to thank you so much for catching up with me. It's 20 years now that we've known each other. It's amazing. Good luck with your race today/tomorrow in New Zealand. And thanks again.
Thanks for having me. And maybe we'll see you next year.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview, and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises.